Okay, so I chose to read about Anyone Who Lived in a Pretty How Town by E.E. Cummings. I chose this one because once I read it, it sparked my brain. And I'll explain about why once I start talking about it. So this is Anyone Who Lived in a Pretty How Town. Anyone who lived in a pretty how town, with up so floating many bells down. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. He sang his didn't, he danced his did. Women and men, both little and small, cared for anyone, not at all. They showed there isn't, they reaped their same. Sun, moon, stars, and rain. Children guessed, but only a few, and down they forgot as they grew. Autumn, winter, spring, summer. That noon loved him more by more, when by now, and tree by leaf, she laughed his joy, she cried his grief. Bird by snow, and stir by still, any was all to her. Someone married, their everyone's laughed, their cryings, and did their dance. Sleep, wake, hope, and then they said their nerves and slept their dream. Stars, rain, sun, moon, and only the snow can begin to explain how children are apt to forget to remember. With up so floating, many bells down, one day anyone died, I guess the noon stooped to kiss his face. Busy folk buried them side by side, little by little, and was by was. All by all, and deep by deep, and more by more. They dreamed their sleep. Noon and anyone, earth by April, wish by spirit, and if by yes. Women and men, both dong and ding, summer, autumn, winter, and spring. Reaped their showing, and went there came, sun, moon, stars, and rain. Alright, so whenever I was reading this, I was reading the explanation of E.E. Cummings, and something that like I said, sparked my brain was when he mentioned his experience in a French prison camp during World War One, and something that I enjoyed reading about in schooling was the Holocaust, concentration camps, and so that's something that kind of reminded me of how these French prison camps would work. And whenever they're talking about, they're talking about the one day anyone died, I guess, and noon stooped to kiss his face, busy folk buried them side by side. That's something that really reminded me of how the camps worked, and the busy folk buried them side by side shows how much just death happened in that point in time. And so that was one thing that really stood out to me whenever that part was said. With the title of it being Anyone Lived in a Pretty How Town, they're talking about someone's married their everyone's, laughed their crying, and did their dance. I feel that talks about the joining of the communities. And let me get back to it. The women and men, both little and small, I think that's talking about the women, children, husbands, fathers, all of those that were in this experience together. The children guessed, but only a few, and down they forgot as they grew up. I feel that's talking about the children who experienced life during this time frame, and they were too young to actually remember what was happening, even how traumatic it was. This was another one talking about the marriage and joining. She laughed his joy and cried his grief. Any was all to her. I feel that's another family aspect that was really good during this time frame, that kind of joined everybody and showed that everybody was going through this all together. Let's see, what else was it? Oh, something else that really, really stood out to me was the repetition that was mentioned, or was used in this, especially in the last 2 stanzas, because it says right. Sorry, I just left chiropractic. One day, anyone died, I guess, busy folk buried them side by side, little by little, was by was, all by all, and deep by deep. So, they buried them side by side, obviously talking about the death of many people. The little by little that could be interpreted more than one way, talking about, like, the children experiencing it together, or just, like, the little groups of people that were in this little town. All by all, everybody was going through it together. And then deep by deep, that could be interpreted more than one way. It could be interpreted with, like, how traumatizing and, like, deep the experience was to the people, or in the just, like, straight up being buried 6 feet under, like, together. More by more, they dream their sleep. I think that could also be talking about, like, the more by more, like, everybody together. That's something I really picked up on this, is how everybody's, like, anyone lived in a pretty how town. I think it's talking about, like, the aspect of everybody being together, the community that's needed to to go through experiences like this, which is even something that you deal with today. It also mentions the moon, stars, and sun, moon, stars, and the rain, and the autumn, winter, spring, and summer. So I feel like that could be about, like, the time period that, like, this was going on for a while, so you got to, like, go through all the seasons with it. And the sun, moon, and stars and rain could be talking about, like, a day, and then this talking about the seasons could be, like, the year that it went. But I think that's all. I really just think it's talking about, like, the community and how everybody in this town had to have their community to get through these experiences.